And so, to continue my series of discussions on phenomenology, I come now to Being and Time by Martin Heidegger, first published in 1927. The principal ideas he advances are that the world, existentially and phenomenologically understood, is a region of human concern. Man is a being in the world, in that by participation and involvement in the world becomes constitutive of man's being. And woman's too, of course. Man and woman has being in an environment, and his or her world is a world he or she shares with others. Man or woman is a creature of concerns in relation to his environment. His or her concerns are practical. In relation to the communal world, his or her concerns are personal. The three fundamental features of a human being are factuality. He or she is already involved in the world. Existentially, he or she is a project and a possibility, that which has been, but also that which can become. And fallenness, he has the tendency to become a mere presence in the world, failing to make the most of his or her possibilities because of gossip, curiosity, and ambiguity. Through anxiety, man encounters nothingness and becomes aware of his finitude and the necessity of death. But through resolution, man and woman, who moves in time from past to future through the present, appraises him or herself, chooses with the whole of his or her being, and thereby achieves authentic existence. So, the primary philosophical problem for Heidegger is the problem of being. His major philosophical treatise, Being and Time, constitutes an attempt at a formulation of the basic questions and forms of analysis which are to lead to a clarification of the meaning and structures of being. The form of analysis which peculiarly characterizes Being and Time is what Heidegger calls Daseinanalytik, analysis of human being. This form of analysis is adopted because it is believed that man is the portal to the deeper levels of reality, and that only through a disciplined analysis and description of human being can the path be opened for an apprehension of being itself. Heidegger, in his analysis and description of human being or presence, Dasein, makes use of the phenomenological method. Philosophy thus becomes phenomenological ontology. The ontological content of philosophy is being, and the method which is used to clarify and explicate the meaning of being is phenomenology. Heidegger was a student of Husserl, and at least in part took over Husserl's transcendental phenomenology and its program of a return to the data themselves. Adherence to this formula, argues Heidegger, will preclude abstract constructions and formulations, sterile concepts, and the adoption of pseudo-questions which tend to conceal the phenomena or the data rather than reveal them. In the use of the phenomenological method, Heidegger seeks to get back to the data of immediate experience and describe these data as they show themselves in their primitive disclosure. The word phenomenon has a Greek etymological root, phenomenon, derived from the Greek phainesthai, which means that which shows itself and that which reveals itself. The original Greek meaning of logos, the second constitutive etymological element in the word phenomenology, is discourse, which opens to sight or lets something be seen. Therefore, phenomenology, properly understood as the logos of the phenomenon, is the disciplined attempt to open to sight that which shows itself and to let it be seen as it is. In using the phenomenological method, one must therefore discard all preconceived logical and epistemological constructions and seek to examine and describe the phenomena as they show themselves. The application of the phenomenological method in the analysis of human being, or Dasein, discloses first of all the foundational experience of being in the world. Man emerges in a world of going concerns, and initially discovers himself in his engagement and involvement in practical and personal projects. Heidegger's phenomenological and existentialist concept of the world should not be confused with any objective conceptualization of the world as a substance or an abstract continuum of points. It is Heidegger's persistent argument that Descartes' conceptualization of the world as a res extensa entailed a phenomenological falsification of the world as a datum of immediate experience. The world is not an extended substance or an objective spatial container into which man is placed. The world, existentially understood, is a field or region of human concern. There is no world without man or woman. Thus, to say that man or woman's being is a being in the world is to describe human reality in terms of a self-world correlation which underlies all concrete participation and engagement. Man is in the world in the sense of being in a profession, being in the army, being in politics, and of course being in love. How that hurts. And so on, being a philosopher, in fact. The relationship between man and the world is not that of a co-inherence of substance or objects, but rather the relationship of existential participation and involvement. Dasein is in the world in the sense of being preoccupied, producing, ordering, fostering, applying, sacrificing, undertaking, following through, inquiring, questioning, observing, taking over, or agreeing. The phenomenon of being in denotes the intimacy and familiarity of being with, as distinct from the objective spatial proximity of being besides. As the phenomenon of world is falsified when understood as a substance and objectivized entity, so also human being or Dasein is distorted when interpreted as a substantial self or a self-identical subject. Again, the error of Descartes' isolation of the thinking substance, res cogitans, is disclosed, and the spurious character of the epistemological quandaries which such a view entails is made apparent. Man and woman is not an isolated epistemological subject who first apprehends his or her own existence and then seeks proof for an external world, for an objective external world anyway. In his or her primordial experience, man and woman already has his or her world given in his or her immediate concerns and preoccupations. My immediate concern at the moment is I have a slight case of wind, but anyway, just ignore that. The world is constitutive of his being. It is in this way that Heidegger's phenomenology undercuts the subject-object dichotomy bequeathed by the Cartesian tradition to contemporary epistemological theory and liberates the self from its lonely, worldless isolation. A phenomenological description of man's being in the world shows that the world is structurally differentiated into various regions or existential modalities. There is the region of the Umwelt, environment, initially disclosed through the utensils which Dasein uses in his practical concerns. My world is disclosed in one of its modifications as an instrumental world in which utensils are accessible for the realization of my various undertakings. The German word zur Hand Ensign, which can be translated as at handes, designates this accessibility of utensils, which constitutes an integral part of my world. Utensils are at hand for one use and application. But my Umwelt is also disclosed in the mode of Vorhandensein, on handes. This modality lacks the existential proximity of at handes and is epistemologically secondary and derivative. For someone who has trouble with his, what's the word? Elocution. I've written a lot of big words here. Anyway, to carry on. Where was I? Heidegger's favourite illustration of these two modifications of the Umwelt or environment is the example of the hammer and the act of hammering. In man's primitive experience of the world, the hammer is an instrument with which he hammers. How more profound can you get? The hammer is revealed as a utensil or instrument through the act of hammering. On this level of experience, knowledge and action, or understanding and doing, are in an inseparable unity. Action is already a form of knowledge, and knowledge involves action. One can, however, objectivize one's environmental world and view one's hammer as a physical object, an abstraction from its instrumental value. When a hammer becomes a mere object or thing, we can speak of it only as being on hand as contrasted with being at hand. The hammer in the mode of on-handness becomes the object of a theoretical scientific construction and is defined in terms of the qualities of weight, composition, size and shape which constitutes it as a material substance. When we say that the hammer as utensil is heavy, we mean that it will render more difficult the act of hammering. When we say the hammer as object is heavy, we mean that it as such has such a scientifically determined weight. The mode of at-handness is thus man's existentially primitive mode, the mode through which Dasein first encounters his world in his practical concerns. Come to think of it, I'm not so bothered about just saying his rather than her. Because this is pretty dumb. So it probably does apply more to a man than a woman. Anyway. The world as on hand is a later construction. Hammering indeed. It's a very male activity. Anyway. Man's being in the world thus includes a relatedness to an environmental region either in the mode of at-handness or on-handness. But man's environment does not exhaust his world. Coupled with his relatedness to an environment region is his relatedness to a communal region. The Dasein world correlation encompasses a Mitwelt as well as an Umwelt. Man's world is a world which he shares with others. Human being is essentially communal. Dasein ist wesenhaft Mitsein. The communality of human being is a pervasive phenomenon which shows itself in man's experience of aloneness as assuredly as in his experience of being with others. Although being with others is probably different for a man than a woman, anyway. Where was it? Yeah. Aloneness is itself a deficient mode of being with. Man experiences aloneness only as a privation of an original communal relatedness. Thus, Dasein possesses an indelible communal character in society, and in solitude, man is structurally a communal creature. now for the most part exists in the unauthentic communal mode of the anonymous one. To exist in the mode of the anonymous one is to exist in one's communal world in such a way that man's unique selfness is depersonalized and reduced to the status of an on-hand being. In short, man transcends himself and another self into an object or a thing, thus depriving both of their unique existential freedom, which alone makes authentic communication possible.